Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and this week we're going to talk about Defence Acquisition Procedure 2020, which has recently been unveiled by the Defence Minister. Now, the DAP 2020 clearly is in line with the government's vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat and also focuses on the Indian domestic defence industry. We'll try and understand various highlights or various features of DAP 2020 and how they will realize the overall vision of Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat as well. For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests. Let me first introduce them to you, beginning with Mr. Ajay Banerjee, Defence Correspondent from the Tribune. We also have with us retired Lieutenant General Dr. V.K. Saxena, Distinguished Fellow at VIF. And we also have with us an industry representative, Mr. Jayant D. Patil, President of the Society of Indian Defence Manufacturers, that is SIDM. Welcome all of you gentlemen to Rajya Sabha Television. Let me begin with you, Ajay, and let's start by giving our viewers highlights of the DAP 2020. What exactly does it focuses on?
See, Vishal, first of all, we must see the DAP in perspective. It is going to be put online in any moment now, today or tomorrow. For me, as I see it, the DAP brings in two critical aspects. It helps the foreign OEMs, that is the original equipment manufacturers. It also helps the domestic industry. It is a win-win situation for both. I'll explain briefly. First of all, see, the government has allowed leasing. Leasing is very, very important. You do not go into putting into a big money into equipment. You may need it for a short term, say for 5 years, so you can lease it. It is done internationally by other countries, like even NATO forces do leasing. So one point is that. The second point is offsets. See, the CAG report recently on September 23rd said the offsets had not helped much. So the government has done away with offsets in three kinds of cases. That is a G2G deal or a government-to-government deal. In case of a foreign military sale route or called the IGA, intergovernmental agreement, or in case of a single vendor. Those are the three parameters. So largely that means if a company which is coming into India, say the Rafales, if you want to buy more Rafales tomorrow, there will be no offset clause because the CAG said very clearly there was actually no technology transfer. The government in the DAP has allowed one critical thing, that is more marks, as they say, they call it accretion, which is when they allow transfer of technology. If a foreign company allows transfer of technology, this is the second part which is important. The third part which is important, which we have to see, is the SQRs, or they call the staff qualitative requirements. These are like parameters for each equipment we buy. Now, these parameters are usually off the market sometimes. I remember the MMRCA case in 2007. We had asked for an ISA radar. The ISA radar did not exist in the world then. It came in much later. So the SQRs have to be realistic. And fourthly, for the industry, it is very, very important that the trials will be very, very quickly done. There will not be testing for various parameters. They will allow trials on basis of the certifications which are available abroad or in certifications abroad by tested laboratories. So that I see this in a holistic picture, that it will bring in better quality of or better technology from the OEMs or the original equipment manufacturers abroad, and also from the Indian perspective, the Indian companies will gain a lot because they will now be given preference over certain aspects and certain parameters in the DAP. Now the DAP brings in also a very important aspect. That aspect is that the DAP will bring in kind of a mergence of the industry, various aspects of the industry will be merged in. We will loosely see the DAP is also renamed of the DPP, that is the Defence Procurement Procedure. Now the DPP came into being around 18-20 years ago. It was moderated several times. The DAP, I believe, no document is complete actually, is a kind of a very good document at the moment. And I see we can make very good progress from here. Vishal?
Okay. Let me bring in, General Saxena here as well. General Saxena, your views on the enabling provisions in DAP 2020, specifically with respect to the, domestic defense industry.
I will provide a bird's eye view of this DAP 2020.
Okay.
Giving out certain enabling provision. What are the hardcore reforms as user is concerned, and what are something new? So those make the enabling provisions altogether. As we know that this DAP 2020, as our defense minister has stated, is resting on three anchors: aligned with the Atmanirbhar Bharat, empower the Indian defense industry on the lines of Make in India, and turn India into a global manufacturing hub. Those are the three verticals on which it stands. So a very short in very brief terms, it brings out certain enabling provisions. Firstly, regarding the FDI, we are aware that in May 2020, the FDI limit on the automatic route has been announced from 49% to 74%. Now, this particular DAP is one of the FDI is one of the enabling provisions in this DAP. In the RFI itself, it is asked whether the foreign OEM is willing to set up business, some sort of a business of making a whole part, subpart, assembly, subassembly, spares, or MRO facility in India for doing this procurement. For this, a special category of procurement has been generated that is called the Buy Global Manufacture in India. That is a separate provision which has started. Next is that the negative import list which the government took out in the defense production and export promotion policy have another provision that you have to certify that when you are doing a procurement that you are not including any one of the negative imported item on a foreign buy list. That is another provision. And third, which is more important, which is more concerned with the user, is, as Ajay was bringing out, is something to related with the procurement reform. If you remember, DPEP has a provision to set up a project management unit, a small PMU, which brings in the best practices of management and ensure that the procurement goes through. Second is the setting up of a technology assessment cell, which brings out the technology readiness level of the industry from time to time. Then second, as Ajay was bringing out, simplification of the trial procedure. Now, trials are the Achilles heels of our production or of our procurement. 6 years, 7 years, 8 years, the trials are going on and the equipment does not come through. So it brings out that only the physical evaluation of the core operational parameters will be tested. Number one. Number two, there will be no duplication. If you bring in a vendor certification from an accredited agency or a certification where you have done a particular test already through computer simulation, otherwise it will be accepted. Second is simultaneity. First, we have the field trial, then we have the MET, then we'll have the MTOT, then we'll have the EMC EMI trial, then we have the DGQ trial, all serially. Years and years will go. The provision is here, do it in a simultaneous manner. Don't spread it in this manner. Third is that rectify. Suppose there is a fault in the trial procedure, there's a trial equipment. We used to say, okay, stop the trial, bring the equipment, start the trial again. No. Within the trial itself, provision is given for repair of the equipment, removing of the shortcoming, as also the draft acceptance procedure is taken from the vendor itself. Now, there are two new provisions. Two new chapters which have been added. One is for the procurement through DRDO, OFB, DPSU. And second is an enabling provision in which the services can procure something on a fast track procedure or a capital acquisition for certain essential items. This much for the enabling provisions.
Okay. I'll come back to you, General Saxena, on other aspects as well. But since, these enabling provisions seems to be focusing a lot on the Indian defense, domestic defense industry, let me bring in the industry representative here as well. Mr. Jayant Patil is with us, the president of the Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers. Mr. Patil, your views or the industry's views as far as DAP 2020 is concerned, because the focus is on domestic industry.
I think the best part of the DAP is the change of mindset from procurement to acquisition. And I think the acquisition mindset means a lot beyond just a procurement. And today, the DAP actually starts talking about right from the R&D to products that are developed and then acquisition of those products right up to the life cycle. So this is an entire ambit which is today covered in the DAP. On tangible side, what actually is there for the Indian industries across board, the indigenous content now is much higher. It's 10% across board. Now, for almost every category, there's a 50% indigenous content needed. So what would start happening is, even if something was to be ordered onto a foreign company, which after the first 5 gates, which are reserved for the Indian companies, let's say the 6th and the 7th gate, one had to actually go. Even in those cases, there will be 50% that will have to happen in the country. The most important aspect of the other point which has been brought out is the simplification of trials And in addition to those trial-related part, what is already being talked about is the API of 74% has happened. But wherever Indian industry genuinely has built those capabilities in their own, those indigenous categories, it is capped at 49. So what it also means is wherever Indian industry actually build capability, those will be utilized by the nation. It will not be then allowed to, for the foreigners, it would not be allowed to compete under those categories. And those are the ones which are on higher priority in the acquisition list. So
Okay.
there is a prioritization of categorization. The higher categories obviously starts with the IDDM. It's reserved for Indian industry. Below 49 only the API can be allowed under those. So is the case with the buy and make, and also the make and the strategic partnerships. Now these are where we believe the largest of the numbers in terms of acquisition volumes will happen, and these are areas where the Indian industry today sees a protection. Most important part, defense acquisition has always seen delays beyond 3 years. Government is now bringing in, earlier they brought in the foreign exchange rate variation. Now they are saying that an inflation correction will also be brought in. Now what it does for industry is nobody needs to do a crystal ball gazing and upfront pass on a much higher cost. People would not mind actually putting realistic price as of date, and thereafter if the inflation happens, it will be compensated. I think some of these processes and some of these now procedures are genuinely earth-shakingly different in the mindset. And of course, that's something which is clearly visible in the DAP 2020 as of now, as we see.
Okay, one more question before I move on to Ajay here, Mr. Patil, and that is about the revision of offset guidelines. How do you view that? How does the industry look at it?
I think the offset guidelines, all of us who've been majors in the industry, within the industry we have clear the major and the MSMEs. The MSMEs actually see this to be a threat, that their volume will go away, and that's essentially where the government is saying there's more than 7 billion of offsets yet to be delivered, and all the past offsets will remain. They are not going to be abolished. For future, especially wherever it's a government-to-government buy or a single-party buy. Single-party buy really means if, let's say, the Rafale is an example of that single-party buy. Also, the FMS is what happens with the US, and similar way the G2G deal that happened with the Russia. In those cases, obviously, those countries do not want to transfer any of the knowledge or transfer of manufacturing here through the offsets. Government is saying it's fine with me. Anything else, offset will still apply. So it's in a way win-win. Again, on both sides, the cost of offsets was actually being paid earlier. Now that cost will go away. Second, as very rightly brought out by my colleagues, there is a clear provision that when offset is to be done, if genuine technology transfer takes place, there's a multiplier which is higher. Next aspect is if somebody is taking components from India, the multiplier has been reduced. Whereas if he is taking complete systems, so that actually is giving a roadmap to the Indian industry to mature from components to systems and from systems to system of systems, and then from there to the platforms. So this is an era which we'll actually see that Make in India truly is being visible in the form of the policy provisions.
Okay. Ajay, one very important aspect here is to look for what exactly might be the immediate, fallout of this DAP 2020 being implemented for both the players here, for the domestic industry as well as armed forces, because there is a long list of requirements of weapons and platforms as far as all three forces are concerned. So how do you see things playing out in the near future on both sides here? Those who need it and those who can supply it?
Vishal, I'm positive on it. One, because the DAP is a very comprehensive document. It lays down very, very threadbare that what all will happen, what all the domestic industry will supply. We have a 101 item negative list, which only the domestic industry will supply. On the panel, we have the Patil Saab, his company is the flag bearer of domestic privatization. Imagine his company started off making a strategic submarine 15 years ago. So if we can make a strategic submarine, I'm very sure that we can make other things also very easily. It is not a big thing. But we need to apply our mind. The private industry needs to be boosted, and the Modi government has done that. Today we have got companies making, say, $700 million worth worth of exports from Hyderabad to just supply parts, helicopter parts or engine parts to other countries. But Vishal, as I see it, this DAP now takes a step forward, takes us into the next league. I'll call it the second phase of indigenization. Why I call it the second phase? Because firstly, from now on, we are clear that we want technology which is high-end, that is artificial intelligence, robotics, we are looking at engine makers, we are looking at those fine print of the engine makers. See, it has taken engine makers like GE or Safran 5 decades to make an engine which is of this class. Now, we are just starting off. Our Kaveri engine is like 70 kilonewton thrust, and our AMCA needs around 110 kilonewton to start off with. So we have to bridge that gap, and that is a big technological gap. Now, the DAP lays stress on the cutting-edge technology which will be brought in, the technology transfer which will be done.
Okay.
The second point which I want to make here, very important for the industry, we should have started off just now, as of yesterday, on making metallurgical parts, casting. I know some work is done by Midhani, but we have to start off by casting and metallurgical parts. That is the most important aspect at the moment. The DAP has done. We are in the second phase of indigenization now. Let us not look back. I'm positive on it, Vishal.
Okay. Jayant, Saxena, your views there on the short-term benefits and the long-term benefits as well when we talk about, as Ajay was talking about, both from the industry perspective as well as if you look at from the end user's perspective, that's the armed forces.
I personally feel that these benefits will only accrue provided the policy, that is the DAP 2020, gets implemented in the manner in which it is formulated. Like you are aware that a few weeks back, the government took out a policy called the Defense Production and Export Promotion Policy, which laid down certain thrust areas, DPEPP 2000, which laid down certain thrust areas in which there were procurement reforms, there were optimization of resource allocation, there were thrust on innovations and R&D, there were thrust on testing procedures, QA, export promotion, and so on. Huge document. I have just written in the media about that this policy is very good, but implementation. Same now come to DAP. Now this DAP 2020 has tremendous provisions. Now setting up of this PMU, suppose this PMU does not deliver the way it is envisaged, then the entire time delay bit of the procedures will remain. Also, setting up of the technical acquisition cell to carry out technical scan as also assessing the technical readiness level if it does not happen in the manner it is envisaged, this will again big apprehension. Also the GSQR. As a user, many years into procurement, we have seen that there are many provisions in GSQR. But when it comes to doability, when it comes to making a comparative analysis of the equipment which is available and telling upfront whether this GSQR will be ultimately doable is the litmus test of the user. Again, very good provision on the trials. Okay, you will do the only physical operational trials. You will not do any duplication. You will not have simultaneous field trial plus MET plus CMC EMI plus others.
Okay.
But to actually make it happen brings 5 to 6 agencies together. Now there are new provisions to take up the innovations which have been done by IDX like Technology and Development Fund or also the Internal Service Organization. This thing has to go bottom upwards. These innovations, as and when they come up, there is a procedure to carry out the design, development and procurement of that. Something very new. That is a challenge to make it happen, actually make it happen. Though, secondly, first is linking of DAP with DPEPP, so long as the commonality exists, or only the common factors. And second is the challenge with the user as well as the industry. Industry upfront says 40% indigenous content, 50%, it has to come good on that. Now take the case of indigenization. There is a government's policy to indigenize 5,000 items by 2025. Who has to do it? The industry, the MSMEs have to come forward, and there may be indigenization portal by DPSUs, OFB, but who has to, the work has to happen to make the indigenization successful, to make the domestic industry come good. Now make 3 has come, make 1, make 2, make 3.
Okay.
Now, all these procedures have to actually happen. That is where is the litmus test of implementation. My apprehension is implementation. Policy very good. implementation is the test of the pudding.
Okay, definitely. Implementation is the test of all policies, and we will keep an eye on how exactly it is implemented. Let's look at the industry perspective on this also, Mr. Patil. As both our panelists are pointing out, there seems to be a very positive scenario for the Indian domestic defense industry with this policy and with DPEPP as well. So, how do you see the road ahead from here onwards? Because industry is one wheel of this entire implementation program. The other one is the end user.
In fact, from industry, I can say very clearly that on export, specifically, we have seen that there's been enormous amount of handholding which the government began. And this is precisely visible in last 5 years. We literally have grown our exports nearly 15-20 times. It was sub 1,000 crores and today it is more than 10,000 crores. And that's essentially where a change has happened. So the export specific part, and that's essentially why I'm pointing it out, is today 92% of this has come out of the private industry, 92-93%. 7% came out of the PSUs. So this is one aspect which was very, I would say, easy to implement because there's nobody who is truly making a decision except that if it's a safe country for the exports to happen, provisions were made, handholding began, and that's where the results are directly there. At the same time, we actually have suffered out of the budget constraints on the defense. From the industry perspective, if we look at the amount of quantum by which we could do well on export, why are we not doing internally? And that's essentially where the budget matters. And if the budget starts getting allocated, then obviously it will make a huge difference. The positive side of it is, with the 101 item list which was put into the negative list now, also there was very, very clear announcements that there would be a 4 lakh crores of acquisition over the next 6 years that would happen on these 101 items.
Okay.
There's also this year itself a budget allocation of 52,000 crores, which is carved out for Indian industry. Now, obviously, any policy is as good as physical implementation. And that physical implementation today, to my mind, there's a silver lining which is being seen now, that the acquisition time, which used to be substantially large, one, because the trial process has been cut. Second, the pure decision-making part of the process. There used to be multiple approvals before an AON could be granted. Now it is very clearly decided that below 500 crore, there's only one level.
Okay.
And next level is straight DAC. And each of those even above would primarily be only 2 levels. Now that makes a huge difference because point at which we used to see years of delay before an AON getting granted, and from AON to RFP now is timed. It has to be done within 6 months. And the DAP, absolutely unambiguous kind of a commitment, it will be implemented from 1st of October. And wherever bids have not yet been made, and if it is not progress far too much, the DAP 20 provisions will apply.
Okay.
So what it means is enormous amount of this positivity which the policy promises or the procedure promises would actually be applicable on the current program. And I think that is what should see as the implementation. So I'm little bullish on the implementation part. Whether all of it gets implemented is a separate issue, which of course only time will tell. But there's another aspect which we used to always have 3 classes of industry. There was a foreign OEM, there's a government-owned enterprise, and then there's a private enterprise. Now, between the government and private, almost all possible avenues of nominations which used to happen for the PSU is today more or less behind us.
Okay.
If one really goes to the procedure, it's almost the last bastions of those nominations today are behind us. And that's essentially where it gives us confidence that if in policy, if the subsequent new RFP is going to be issued after 1st of October, it has to allow competition. There's just no two ways. Not that any nomination happened over the last 2 to 3 years, except for exceptional programs. And those have been more from the security considerations than in anything else.
Okay.
But the bulk of what we see in terms of times to come would be programs where there will be open competition. It would be Indian to Indian competition. Foreign competition comes in only for the buy global, and just before that, to make that guy do it in India is a buy global manufacture in India. And
Okay.
there again, Indian company can always participate, because by global, I am as well a global citizen, I can participate.
Okay, there it is. Thank you so much, Mr. Patil, as well as Ajay, Banerjee, and General Saxena for sharing your views with us and our viewers. As our panelists are pointing out, policy tweaks are really important, and so is the implementation part. And as far as DAP 2020 is concerned, it is giving a lot of push to the domestic defense industry. Thus, in the longer run, hoping or aiming to make India self-reliant in defense production. We'll come back again with a different topic next week and a different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.